Most people believe that change comes from motivation, willpower, or one powerful decision. But what if the real force shaping your life is something much quieter? Something you do every day without thinking. This video will reveal how habits secretly control your actions, your mindset, and your future. You'll discover why small behaviors have massive consequences, why willpower often fails, and how your brain can be reprogrammed to work for you instead of against you. If you've ever felt stuck, inconsistent, or frustrated with yourself, this isn't about trying harder. It's about understanding the system running your life. Once you see it, change is no longer mysterious. It becomes inevitable. I hope you find this information useful as you enjoy these clips. Let's dive right in. First, why habits control more of your life than you think. Most people like to believe that their lives are shaped by big decisions, the career choice they made, the relationship they entered, or the risks they took at crucial moments. But they actively plan to procrastinate, snack mindlessly, or postpone important tasks. These behaviors happen automatically, almost invisibly, yet they shape the direction of your entire life. Research suggests that a large percentage of our daily actions are habitual. That means most of what you do each day is not the result of deliberate thinking, but the repetition of patterns your brain has learned over time. Your brain loves efficiency. To conserve energy, it turns repeated behaviors into shortcuts, habits, so you don't have to think every time you act. This is helpful for survival, but dangerous when the habit is destructive. The real power of habits lies in their invisibility. Because habits feel natural, we rarely question them. We assume, this is just how I am, or this is my personality, when in reality, many personality traits are simply reinforced habits. The way you respond to failure, the way you handle conflict, even the way you talk to yourself internally. These are often habitual responses, not fixed traits. Over time, habits compound. A single habit may seem insignificant in the moment. Skipping one workout, delaying one task, or choosing comfort over effort feels harmless. But habits are not about single actions. They are about direction. Repeated daily, small habits slowly push your life forward or pull it backward. The scary part is that you often don't notice the consequences until years later. This is why habits can be more powerful than motivation. Motivation is emotional and temporary. It comes and goes. Habits, on the other hand, operate even when motivation disappears. When a behavior becomes automatic, it no longer requires willpower. It simply happens, whether it helps you or harms you. Understanding that habits control more of your life than you think is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to empower you. If habits are shaping your life right now, then changing your habits means changing your future. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You need to become aware of the patterns running in the background and decide which ones deserve to stay. The moment you realize that habits are silently writing your story, you stop blaming luck, circumstances, or other people. You begin to see control where you once felt helpless, and that realization is the first step toward real, lasting change. Second, the hidden science behind how habits are. Formed habits do not appear overnight, and they are not a matter of luck or personality. Behind every habit, good or bad, there is a precise neurological process happening inside the brain. Understanding this hidden science is the key to understanding why habits are so hard to break and so powerful once they are formed. At the center of habit formation is the brain's desire to save energy. Your brain is constantly overwhelmed with information, decisions, and stimuli. If you had to consciously think through every small action, tying your shoes, driving to work, or brushing your teeth, you would quickly become mentally exhausted. To survive, the brain looks for patterns and automates them. This automation happens in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. When you repeat a behavior enough times, the brain begins to recognize a pattern. A situation triggers an action, followed by some form of reward. Once this loop is identified, the brain stores it and runs it automatically, freeing up mental space for other tasks. This process is often called the habit loop. It consists of 3 elements: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is the trigger, a time, emotion, location, or event that signals the brain to go into automatic mode. The routine is the behavior itself. The reward is what tells the brain that the behavior is worth remembering. Over time, this loop becomes stronger and faster until it runs with, even if you logically know it's harmful. The brain is expecting a reward it has learned to depend on. Another hidden factor in habit formation is emotion. Habits tied to strong emotions form much faster than neutral ones. Stress, fear, pleasure, and relief accelerate habit creation. This is why people often develop unhealthy habits during difficult periods of their lives. The brain desperately looks for relief and locks onto whatever provides it. Repetition alone is not enough. Consistency is what truly ingrains a habit. When a behavior is repeated in the same context, same time, same place, same emotional state, the neural pathway becomes stronger. The more this pathway is used, the harder it becomes to ignore. This is why changing your environment is often more effective than relying on willpower alone. The science of habits also explains why breaking them feels like swimming against the current. Even when you stop performing a habit, the neural pathway does not disappear. It weakens, but it remains. This is why old habits can resurface under stress. The brain reverts to familiar pathways when under pressure. Understanding the science behind habit formation changes how you see yourself. You stop labeling yourself as lazy, weak, or undisciplined. Instead, you recognize that you are operating on deeply wired neurological patterns. And once you understand how those patterns are built, you gain the ability to rebuild them intentionally, strategically, and patiently. Third, good habits versus bad habits. The silent battle. Inside your brain. Inside your brain, a silent battle is happening every single day. It is not loud, dramatic, or obvious, yet its outcome determines the quality of your life. This battle is between good habits and bad habits, and most of the time, you're not even aware that it is taking place. Both good and bad habits are built using the same neurological machinery. Your brain does not label habits as healthy or destructive. It only recognizes what feels familiar and rewarding. This is why bad habits can feel so natural and comforting, even when they clearly work against your long-term goals. From the brain's perspective, familiarity equals safety. Good habits usually require effort at the beginning. They often come with delayed rewards. Exercising, reading, saving money, or practicing a skill does not provide instant pleasure. The reward is distant, abstract, and uncertain. Bad habits, on the other hand, tend to offer immediate relief or pleasure. They calm stress, reduce discomfort, or create a quick emotional escape. The brain is naturally drawn to what feels good now, not what will be good later. This creates a constant internal conflict. One part of your brain understands logic, goals, and long-term consequences. Another part seeks comfort, routine, and immediate satisfaction. When you are tired, stressed, or a menace, a trigger appears, an old routine activates, and before you realize it, the behavior is already done. The brain chose the familiar path, not the better one. Over time, bad habits gain strength through repetition. Each time they are repeated, the neural pathway becomes thicker and faster. Good habits, if neglected, grow weaker. This imbalance creates the illusion that change is impossible, when in reality, the system is simply reinforcing what it has practiced most. However, the brain is not fixed. The same plasticity that allows bad habits to dominate can be used to build good ones. Every time you resist a bad habit or perform a positive behavior, you slightly weaken one pathway and strengthen another. The change may be invisible at first, but neurologically, it is real. The key is understanding that this is not a moral struggle, but a biological one. You are not failing because you lack character or discipline. You are responding to deeply ingrained patterns that have been reinforced over time. Once you stop judging yourself and start observing your habits objectively, you gain power over them. The silent battle inside your brain never truly ends. But the side that wins is the one you train consistently. Over time, good habits can become just as automatic, just as effortless, and just as powerful as bad ones once were. And when that shift happens, self-control is no longer a constant struggle. It becomes your default state. Fourth, how tiny daily actions create massive life changes. Most people underestimate the power of small actions because they are looking for dramatic transformations. They want instant results, big breakthroughs, and visible success. But real, lasting change rarely happens that way. It happens quietly, through tiny daily actions that seem insignificant in the moment, yet reshape an entire life over time. Your brain does not respond to single events as strongly as it responds to patterns. One productive day will not change your future, just as one bad day will not destroy it. What matters is what you do repeatedly. Small actions, when performed consistently, send a clear message to your brain about who you are and what you value. Over time, that message becomes your identity. Tiny habits work because they lower resistance. Big goals often trigger fear, doubt, and overwhelm. When a task feels too large, the brain seeks comfort and avoidance. Small actions, however, feel manageable. They don't activate the brain's threat system. Reading one page, doing 5 minutes of exercise, or saving a small amount of money feels easy. And that ease is what allows consistency to form. Consistency is where the magic happens. Each small action strengthens a neural pathway. At first, the progress is almost invisible. You don't feel different, you don't see dramatic results. This is the dangerous phase where most people quit. They assume nothing is happening. In reality, the foundation is being built below the surface. Over time, these tiny actions compound. Just like interest in a bank account, the effects accelerate. A habit that feels pointless in the first week can become life-changing after months or years. Confidence grows from repeated small wins. Skill develops from daily practice, not sudden inspiration. Health improves from daily choices, not occasional effort. The brain loves predictability. When you repeat small actions at the same time and in the same context, they become automatic. What once required discipline begins to require none. The habit runs on autopilot, and effort is replaced by momentum. This is when change becomes sustainable. Tiny actions also reshape how you see yourself. Every small habit is a vote for the person you are becoming. When you act consistently, even in small ways, your self-trust increases. You begin to believe that you are someone who follows through. This shift in self-image is often more powerful than the habit itself. Massive life changes are not created by single decisions, but by the accumulation of ordinary choices. The direction of your life is shaped not by what you do occasionally, but by what you do daily. When you understand this, you stop chasing dramatic motivation and start focusing on small, repeatable actions. In the end, tiny daily actions do not just change what you do, they change who you become. And once your identity shifts, the results you once struggled for begin to appear naturally. Fifth, the habit loop. Cue, routine, and reward. Explained, every habit in your life, no matter how complex it seems, follows a simple internal structure. This structure is known as the habit loop, and it explains why habits form, why they repeat, and why they are so difficult to change. Once you understand this loop, habits stop feeling mysterious and start becoming predictable. The first part of the loop is the cue. The cue is the trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. It can be a time of day, a location, an emotional state, the presence of certain people, or even a specific thought. The cue is not the habit itself. It is the signal that starts the process. Often, cues operate below conscious awareness, which is why habits can feel like they come out of nowhere. The second part is the routine. This is the behavior you perform once the cue appears. The routine can be physical, mental, or emotional. It could be checking your phone, eating, procrastinating, exercising, or engaging in negative self-talk. Over time, the brain links the cue and the routine together so tightly that one automatically follows the other. The third part is the reward. The reward is what teaches your brain that the routine is worth remembering. It can be pleasure, relief, distraction, comfort, or even a sense of control. The reward does not have to be large or obvious. What matters is that the brain perceives it as valuable. Once the reward is experienced, the brain stores the entire loop for future use. With repetition, the habit loop becomes faster and stronger. Eventually, the brain begins to anticipate the reward as soon as the cue appears. This anticipation creates craving. Craving is what drives the habit forward, even when the routine no longer provides much satisfaction. The brain is chasing the expectation, not the experience. This explains why breaking habits is so challenging. Removing the routine does not remove the cue or the craving. The brain still expects a reward. This is why willpower alone often fails. You may resist the habit temporarily, but the unresolved craving creates tension that eventually pushes you back to the old behavior. The key to changing habits is not to eliminate the loop, but to redesign it. The cue usually remains the same because cues are often tied to your environment or emotions. The reward often stays the same as well because the brain still wants the same outcome: relief, pleasure, or comfort. What you change is the routine. By consciously choosing a new routine that delivers a similar reward, you weaken the old habit and strengthen a new one. This is how habits are replaced, not erased. Over time, the brain begins to associate the cue with the new routine, and the old pathway fades into the background. Understanding the habit loop gives you control. Instead of fighting yourself, you work with how your brain naturally operates. Habits stop being personal failures and become systems that can be adjusted. And once you learn how to adjust them, lasting change becomes possible. Sixth, why willpower fails and habits succeed. Willpower is often treated as the ultimate solution to change. People believe that if they just try harder, push more, or stay disciplined, they can overcome any obstacle. But in reality, willpower is one of the most unreliable tools for long-term change. Habits succeed where willpower fails because they operate on an entirely different system. Willpower is a limited resource. It depends on energy, focus, and emotional stability. When you are well-rested, calm, and motivated, willpower feels strong. But stress, fatigue, hunger, and emotional pressure drain it quickly. This is why people tend to make their worst decisions at the end of the day. It's not because they don't care. It's because their mental resources are depleted. Habits, on the other hand, do not rely on decision-making. Once a behavior becomes habitual, it requires little to no conscious effort. The brain runs it automatically, regardless of mood or energy level. This is what makes habits so powerful. They work even when you don't feel like trying. Another reason willpower fails is that it creates constant internal conflict. Every time you rely on willpower, you are forcing your brain to choose against comfort and familiarity. This creates resistance. The more you fight your instincts, the more exhausted you become. Eventually, the brain seeks relief, and old habits return stronger than before. Habits eliminate this conflict. When a behavior becomes automatic, there is no debate. You don't argue with yourself about brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. The action simply happens. This is the state where consistency becomes effortless. Willpower also focuses on short-term control, while habits focus on long-term structure. Willpower says, resist this urge right now. Habits say, design your life so the urge rarely appears. By changing your environment and routines, habits reduce the need for constant self-control. This is why people who seem highly disciplined are often not using willpower at all. They have structured their lives around strong habits. Their decisions are made in advance. When people try to eliminate the habit without understanding the reward behind it, they create a gap. The brain still wants the reward, and it will push hard to get it back, often leading to relapse. Another common mistake is relying on sudden, extreme change. People decide to quit a habit completely overnight, expecting immediate transformation. While this can work briefly, it often collapses under stress. The brain is deeply attached to familiar patterns. When change feels too drastic, the brain interprets it as a threat and seeks safety by returning to old behaviors. Many people also underestimate the power of cues. They blame themselves for lacking discipline while continuing to expose themselves to the same triggers every day. If the environment remains unchanged, the habit will keep activating automatically. Trying to fight a habit while keeping the same cues is like trying to stay dry while standing in the rain. Another reason people fail is emotional overload. Bad habits are often tied to stress, anxiety, or loneliness. When emotions run high, the rational brain becomes quieter and automatic behaviors take over. Without alternative ways to manage emotions, the brain will always return to the fastest source of relief it knows. Shame is one of the most damaging tools people use. Instead of helping, shame reinforces the habit loop. Feeling bad about a habit increases stress, which then triggers the habit again as a form of escape. This creates a cycle where the habit becomes both the problem and the temporary solution. Breaking bad habits requires a different mindset. Instead of asking, "How do I stop this?" the better question is, "What need is this habit meeting?" Once you identify the reward, you can design a healthier routine that satisfies the same need without the damage. Change also requires patience. The neural pathways of old habits do not disappear instantly. They weaken gradually through repetition of new behaviors. Progress is rarely linear. Setbacks are not failures. They are part of the rewiring process. Most people get breaking bad habits wrong because they fight themselves instead of redesigning the system. When you work with your brain instead of against it, change stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a process you can actually win. 8th, reprogramming your mind. Turning discipline into autopilot. Discipline is often imagined as constant effort, self-control, and mental toughness. People believe that disciplined individuals are always pushing themselves, resisting temptation, and forcing action through sheer will. In reality, the most disciplined people are rarely fighting themselves. They have reprogrammed their minds so that discipline runs on autopilot. The human brain is designed to automate repeated behavior. When a behavior is repeated consistently in the same context, the brain begins to treat it as default. This is the foundation of mental reprogramming. Discipline stops being something you do and becomes something that happens. Reprogramming your mind starts with reducing friction. Every extra step between you and a good behavior increases the chance of failure. When healthy choices are easy and obvious, the brain adopts them naturally. This is why environment design is more powerful than motivation. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Another key element is identity. The brain is more likely to repeat behaviors that align with how you see yourself. When you act in a disciplined way, even in small moments, you reinforce a new identity. Over time, the brain protects that identity by making the behavior automatic. Discipline becomes self-expression rather than self-control. Consistency matters more than intensity. Sporadic bursts of effort do not reprogram the brain. Repetition does. When actions are repeated daily, even at a low level, neural pathways strengthen. Eventually, the behavior no longer requires conscious decision-making. The brain executes it without debate. Habits also remove emotional negotiation. Without habits, every action requires a decision, and every decision drains energy. With habits, the decision has already been made. This is what autopilot truly means. Action without argument. Reprogramming does not mean eliminating discomfort. It means making the right action the easiest option. When discomfort appears, the habit carries you through it. You no longer ask whether you should act. You simply act. The transformation is subtle but powerful. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once required discipline becomes routine. This is the moment when progress accelerates, because effort is no longer the limiting factor. Turning discipline into autopilot is not about becoming rigid or robotic. It is about freeing mental energy for creativity, focus, and growth. When the basics of your life run automatically, you gain the space to build something greater,